All right, well, I know we've got a lot to talk about today, so let's just go ahead and get it kicked off. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Kalia Garrido. I will be much like your MC today. I am the Director of Marketing here at Zera Hemp Labs, and I am very excited to present you with the next webinar in our Hemp How-To series. Today, we are going to do a deep dive into the lesser known cannabinoids like D8, CBG, THCv. And we're going to talk about why they're so important to today's hemp industry. So before we get everything officially started, let me do a little bit of introductions. Zera Hemp Labs is an innovative online solution, and we are busy connecting hemp producers with accredited testing labs nationwide to ensure fast, easy, and accurate hemp testing. This webinar series is designed to provide resources and information on a variety of critical topics in the world of hemp, including cultivation, extraction, product manufacturing, wholesalers, regulations, and more. And then, of course, we're also busy behind the scenes creating a great warehouse of really valuable content for people that are involved in the hemp industry. We've just released our 2021 Hemp Farmers Calendar, and so we will be sending this out to all of our registrants as a thank you for joining us. So this is a super valuable resource for people who are either new to growing hemp or looking to up-level their grow game. Or maybe people who just need a reference on, regionally specific hemp growing information in their area. So I will follow up with some of that after our session today. So before we get started, the housekeeping, we're here for about an hour, probably a little bit less, maybe 45 minutes, but we're recording the presentation. So if you got something that pops up and you got to drop, that's totally okay. We'll send it out to you after. And we'll also save some time at the end for questions. So feel free to jump into the Q&A at any time. I'll kind of compile those as these guys are getting the conversation kicked off. And so today I'm very excited to introduce two of the hemp and cannabis industry's most knowledgeable Andrews. This is my only opportunity to say this ever in a webinar, so I went for it and I'm sticking by it. So first up, we have Zera Hemp Labs' own Andy Hopkins. Before stepping in as the Director of Operations here at Zera, he was responsible for designing one of the industry's biggest premium software as a service ERP platforms. He's also managed operations for a vertically integrated cannabis company in Colorado. One of the first with multiple locations and a multi-state presence, so that's kind of a big deal. Needless to say, Andy brings extensive experience when it comes to creating processes and structures in the hemp and cannabis industry. And this guy knows his business. I know for a fact because he checks me on mine all the time. Also joining us today, we have Andrew Marlett. He is the general manager at Farm Labs in Texas. And Andrew has been working in the professional cannabis and hemp industry for honestly most of his adult life. So after spending many years in California, he recently returned to his home state of Texas to help contribute to the growing Texas hemp industry. He's focused specifically on extraction, post-processing, and formulation. He's also spent a good amount of time consulting on lab build-outs for the small-scale farmer and processors as a passion project. So it's like you're just hitting it from it's business, it's passion, it's all the things. I could definitely get behind that. So. Like we said, he's now the GM at Farm Labs in Texas, the Farmers Branch, which is a leading cannabis testing facility that provides quick and accurate hemp testing, including terpene profile analysis, hemp potency testing, and pesticide testing. So that is all that I have today. I will kick it over to you, Andy, to get the Q&A kind of kicked off.
Thank you, Kalia. All right, well, to begin with, let's start with a little background on cannabinoids and their quote-unquote legalization. As I understand it, the 2018 Farm Bill explicitly legalizes all hemp-derived cannabinoids so long as they are produced from hemp material, which at the time of harvest is under that 0.3% THC.
Yes, 100%. They legalized everything but your D8, your D9, and your THCA, effectively.
It's interesting that you almost said D8 there because
yeah.
One of the arguments that you hear about the intent of this bill was that cannabinoids are being legalized so long as they're not intoxicating or psychoactive, and Delta 8 seems like it doesn't line up with that.
I know that there were some people who were composing the bill that was their intent because they publicly said so. but you can read the entire Farm Bill. That is never listed as an intent. So, you know, I think that there were other people who stood by what the Farm Bill said, which is, you know, they're going to leave it to the individual states to regulate cannabinoids, and then the federal government will back them up accordingly, which is why you're now seeing many states take steps against Delta 8. And that's how they set it up with the Farm Bill.
And one of the interesting things about these lesser known cannabinoids is that in the plant, in growing hemp itself, you're not really seeing large amounts of these secondary cannabinoids. You're seeing more of a trace amount of these kinds of cannabinoids in the plant material.
Yeah, absolutely. That they're, you know, most of these, you know, your Delta 8, your CBN, your THCv, those are isomers of cannabinoids. So they're effectively, take the Lego pieces apart and you put them back together, and you change the cannabinoid, the hydrocarbon structure, over to a separate hydrocarbon structure. They're not synthetic. They're not, they are still plant derived because all the material did come from a plant. Now, they did use a lot of catalysts in the processes to cause those conversions, and there's questions of their safety and effectiveness, but that's a to be determined.
So really what we're seeing for the production of these secondary cannabinoids is that there was a large presence of something else, and then they take that cannabinoid and they can convert it to these kind of secondary cannabinoids. If you could go into a little bit more detail about what that process looks like.
Yeah, so for the most part, you know, let's take Delta 8, for example. You process your hemp all the way down to CBD isolate, and now you have a, you know, ideally 99.9% pure product, and you're going to use chemistry to cause it to convert over to another cannabinoid. And you restructure, reorder, like I said, Lego pieces, you rebuild that cannabinoid, and you can structure it as Delta 8. You can structure it as you can turn it into D9. You can turn it into THCv. Chemistries like that. It, you know, gives you have a lot of options.
It sounds like alchemy, right? It's taking something and converting it into something much more valuable.
Indeed.
Well, one of the things that we've noticed with Zera is that there has been a significant emergence of CBG enriched strains in hemp production. What do you feel the main reason is for that sudden popularity of this overlooked cannabinoid?
Well, you know, CBG is it's the mother of all cannabinoids, as they say, and it is really has some very interesting effects. There's studies that have shown that it has about 30% the effectiveness of increasing other minor cannabinoids and CBD absorption into the human body through the endocannabinoid system. It allows for, in some cases, absorption through the CB1 and CB2 receptors. These are things we normally see with tetracannabinoids like D8 or D9. But since there is effectively no psychoactive effect to CBG, it's opened a whole new realm of possibilities. We don't have to have those full spectrum products that have a little D9 in them to have them be so much more effective. We can just increase the CBG content in that same product and get the same effects.
Well, that is really interesting. We're talking about two different kinds of enriched genetic lines, I guess. So we've got a pretty serious presence of CBD enriched strains. We're seeing this CBG enriched strain, number of genetics coming into the market. Is there something that can cause either of those to suddenly start producing THC? Sure,
absolutely. Cannabinoid production is a hormone response in the plants, and THC, specifically THCA, is a response to stressors for the most part. There is effectively only one plant. I know for the legal reasons, we have this delineation between cannabis, or as the federal government likes to say, MJ, and hemp, but effectively it's one plant. So, the plant gets stressed, THC production goes up. In the traditional market, indoor growers have been stressing their plants intentionally through different methodologies to increase THC production and to increase bud growth and things of that nature. same things happen with hemp. Unfortunately, the farmer doesn't want those to happen. So something like you move genetics from one part of the country to another into an environment that specific cultivar is not designed to grow in, it takes years or cycles, multiple growth cycles, to kind of weed out those negative effects that you get from removing it. And you'll see increased THC production because the plant's stressed out.
Well, that's one thing that we've heard from growers and genetic producers. You see a number of people these days that are advertising, regional specific strains, right? Like, we've grown this in Virginia and it's done great. So you're saying that's a real thing. There absolutely is a grow this strain here, don't grow this strain here.
100%. It is 100% a real thing. Farmers here in Texas last year who brought in their genetics from Oregon or from, Southern Colorado, Northern Colorado, they all had different problems, increased issues with mold, increased issues with, some strains don't respond well to high water table. And if you get 30 inches of rain, like some parts of Texas do, if it was grown repeatedly in a desert environment like it is in Southern Colorado, it's not going to do well. I've seen stalks literally turn to mush, because it got, 12 inches of rain in 24 hours. That's Texas. Other strains that were brought from areas like Oregon responded very well to that, but they don't respond as well to the increased sun content. They don't respond as well to, because it's an equatorial plain issue, terroir issue, and the overall, environment as a whole, the biome. And you have to take into account all of those things when selecting the strains that you're going to grow. And we can't even say that, like you mentioned, I believe it was Tennessee a minute ago. You can't say in Tennessee, this strain does well. You have to get down to the regional water table. You have to get down to the regional sun levels. You have to get down to all of that to really understand what you're doing. So I recommend to everybody that they plant test plots where they don't intend to make money on them, and they, grow out, 30, 40 plants. You don't have to do much. You can take an acre and pull 30, 40 strains that you think will do well, and then take 3 months and just do your research. And that's effectively what that is. That's R&D.
Right. So it sounds like the best model is if you found something that works, that you were successful with the previous year, it's probably the best move to try and run that same kind of crop again, and then on the side do your R&D to try and find something that might be better.
I would say take it even further than that. So you can get seeds to do your R&D. When you find a plant that does very well, that plant needs to be cloned. Because that's you're going to be ensuring the genetics get carried over. You grow a mother, bring it inside, take care of it, and that's your money right there, is your mother. And it's the same as the traditional industry. That's what they found for indoor growing, is once they found genetics, a cultivar that does very well in their specific environment, they guard that like it's their money, because it is.
And that's an amazing lead-in. Earlier this year, we did release a genetic selection kind of blog where we go through how to run through a series of seeds, find a winner, and then go through the whole cloning process. Because you're absolutely right. If you find something that's going to work, even with seeds, breeders that have bred number of harvests in a row, the stabilization just isn't there. This is such a new industry. You really need to make sure, you don't really need to make sure. The best way to ensure that you are going to have the same plant from plant to plant is by doing cloning. So that's great that you brought that up. One of the things that I don't know a ton about is the industrial hemp side. I've been on the cannabis side. I'm familiar with that. I'm familiar with the whole, usable flower market for CBD and the cannabinoid enriched version of the hemp program. But the industrial hemp program, that's something that I know less about. Do cultivators normally take industrial hemp to the flowering phase?
Flower production is a part of industrial hemp growing. It's just, but they don't, ensure, the 12 on 12 light cycles. They don't, add nutrients to increase bud growth. it's just a part of the plant's, growth cycle. And if they're going to replant their crop, quite often farmers will go ahead and let it go to seed because they're going to harvest those seeds, separate them out, and that's their next planting cycle. There is an interesting little side note about industrial hemp. There are industrial hemp varietals that are coming out that have enough CBD in them that some people feel that that it's worth doing a extraction using cold press or something like that, and then sending it over to the gin and have it processed out to fiber. I question whether or not that's worth it, but because they're going to start to be concerned about cannabinoid profile. They're going to deal with more issues with THC, things of that nature. And if you're in a state like Texas where you have an incredibly strict what defines total cannabinoids, which we don't get to do any of the fun stuff with THCA, subtracting for decarboxylation. It's very hard for a farmer to grow anything to 0.3. So if you're going to start doing that with industrial hemp, hoping for CBD production, I think you should just focus on fiber. I think you'll do better, but we'll see. I may be proved wrong.
Yeah, and I mean this industry's so new, right? Like it's always possible that somebody could continue breeding and really find something where you can do the industrial and CBD route. But CBD production, it seems like it's hit a pretty serious saturation point in the industry. Do you think that CBG's emergence is going to be a long-term trend in hemp cultivation?
Without question, it's far too versatile. Like I said, it's the mother of all cannabinoids. It's the first one the plant forms as part of the cannabinoid production phase. And from isomerizations to other cannabinoids to its effectiveness as a, we'll call it a flux for the increase in uptake of other cannabinoids to CBG's benefit in and of itself. I think CBG's here to stay, but the prices are definitely going to go down. We'll probably see the exact same pattern where, when there's a scarcity, leads to increased costs. And as more and more people grow it, and especially since the CBG dominant strains tend to have little to no THC in them, you can get far more out of a growth cycle than you can with by weight than you could out of a CBD crop, due to the fact that you can not have to be as concerned about the Delta-9 content.
What are some of these lesser known cannabinoids that you're seeing around the lab these days?
Sure. A lot of things that people are, everybody knows about Delta-8. It's been about a year and a half now since it's really kind of exploded. But you have Delta-10, which again, it's a tetracannabinoid, so it's psychoactive to a certain extent. So we'll see how long where that'll go, because it's all still up in the air. You have CBDV, THCV, THCP. Everybody and anybody is interested in all the minors now. They're looking for that next big niche market that they can really exploit and be one of the first people in it, so they can get that big money.
Well, talking about Delta 8, 9, and 10, all the Deltas now, one thing that we've heard from customers is that it's hard to find a lab that can really differentiate between the three of those. You are affiliated with the lab. I'm sure you guys do a great job, but I'm sure it's been difficult. Can you talk a little bit about how you ensure that Delta 8, Delta 9, and Delta 10 are unique?
Mm-hmm. All of the isomerized cannabinoids that we test with very different SOPs, and they're proprietary. We've spent a tremendous amount of time and money to develop these and shown that they're proven. We really honestly should probably charge more for isomerized cannabinoid testing, because there is so much that can go wrong in not only sample prep but in the testing protocols to sample handling, that it's probably a 50% increase in the workload to do it correctly. Farm Labs Texas does have a stellar reputation from everything that I've know and heard for testing. Because we give you accurate data, we provide you with your chromatograms. We'll give you any and all information to show. But since we're talking about the minors and specifically D8, D8's not stable. It's really not. So, even if it does test correct a week or two after it's produced, if you didn't produce a quality D8 in the first place, it's going to lead to problems down the road.
Well, I did a little bit of Google searching for a price on these minor cannabinoids, and it's crazy. I saw THCv isolate at $50,000 a kilo, CBDV isolate at $50,000 a kilo, CBC at $16,000, CBN $9,000, and then CBD down at like $650 a kilo. Mm-hmm. CBG was at $4,000 a kilo. It seems like CBD is the lowest price, probably due to the saturation. And then, these isolates are being used in some kind of product, I assume. Are you familiar with what kind of products these kinds of things are going into? THCv, CBDV?
Mm-hmm, absolutely. I don't want to get into the side of it where I start speaking as a doctor on the medical benefits of cannabinoids, but I'll let you Google that stuff. There's a lot of good information out there. The kind of products, let's take THCv, for example. It is widely known as an appetite suppressant. It is in, most air quotes here because I don't like the term, sativas. And it is, it has a lot of benefits. CBN, everybody knows low quantities of CBN lead towards sleep. They're greatly beneficial on it. But then when you start getting into combining cannabinoids and combining terpenes, and then, I'm now seeing products where people are mixing in other ethnogens like cordyceps, which are a type of mushroom, a fungus. You get even more novel effects that you don't see, and even in a plant. So as to what kind of products, literally anything you can think of.
Well, it seems like, there's still a lot of research that needs to be done on these cannabinoids and what their effects are. And so, yeah, I imagine there's going to be countless iterations of product creation going forward. But I guess the biggest thing to me as a takeaway there is that the CBD is kind of a input material almost at this point. There is an absolute market for CBD products, right? Like go to Whole Foods, you go online, you listen to the radio, there's CBD products everywhere. So there's certainly a market for it. But I feel like an interesting thing here is the value of those secondary cannabinoids. And so I'd like to kind of talk about when you're doing this isomerization process. If you have CBD as an input or you have CBG as an input, what can you expect when you're converting this input material to one of these more valuable secondary cannabinoids?
Sure. In the isomerization process, you get loss. So your input material, you might lose 80%, as much as 80% on your output. So conversion from, say, a CBD to THCV, these are hypothetical numbers here, but you could lose 80% of your original input by weight. So that's part of the cost. The additional things that lead towards that, like you said, $50,000 price point is the equipment necessary to do these isomerizations and refine the product afterwards. Highly expensive. The knowledge base to do it, limited. Very few people know how to do it correctly. And then since there are those two factors in place and the increased loss, you have scarcity, specialized skill set, everything about it. It's going to be incredibly expensive. But, I think back to when CBD isolate first came on the market, I think it was like $20,000 a kilo was the first price I ever saw, and so of course that when things are new, they're novel, and only, I'm making this number up, but if there's 10 labs in the US that make quality THCV, they're going to charge $50,000 a kilo. That's why it is those price points, because, to get, and then on top of that, you have plant derived versus isomerized, that thing. So we can talk about like the plant derived being the whole foods version. It's safer, all that kind of stuff. So CBG that's all plant derived is going to have a higher price point because you didn't have to start with, you said CBD, you've seen it as much as $650. I've seen it within the last several months as low as $250 a kilo. It bought at volume, of course. And so when you take into account all that, there's, You have the Walmart model, which is your isomerized cannabinoids. Then you have the lower quantity, harder to refine, plant derived, which has a higher price point because it meets that, natural label claim.
Well, when you're talking about the extraction process, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're growing a plant. The plant has 15% CBD. You grow a plant, it has 15% CBG. Let's just say that's possible, right? Those genetics exist out there. Is there one of those that's easier to extract than the other one?
Not really. I mean, the extraction of most extraction methodologies use some form of non-polar solvent, or in the case of ethanol, a polar solvent, to extract the oily substances that contain the cannabinoids. Okay, so you have glandular structures, trichomes, and other parts of the plant that produce oils. The oils have the cannabinoids. You're just stripping away that material. So extraction of, you'll see differences. Different extraction methodologies have different percentages of return from the original material, but it isn't necessarily that some extraction processes are better for extracting some cannabinoids than others. You just have to change the parameters at which you extract those materials with that equipment. So you wouldn't necessarily, for a high CBG strain, want to run the exact same CO2 parameters that you would for CBD. But with the correct knowledge base, understanding, at what pressure settings you need to be and things of that nature, you can get the same yields that you would on a CBD versus CBG.
So taking into account all these factors, you might get a higher CBD percentage than you get of a CBG percentage from strain to strain. CBG, being that mother cannabinoid being produced before THC is present, has a better chance of remaining compliant up to the point of harvest, right? If you extract CBD or you extract CBG, you're getting roughly the same return based on the percentage in the plant. What's the best option for these first-time farmers? For somebody that is either getting into the market for the very first time, or wasn't successful last year, wants to try something new, what's the best plan for them?
My advice to farmers has always been to have an entire business plan in place prior to putting any plants in the ground. You need to have an idea or an actual contract of who you're selling it to. A lot of farmers, they get pie in the sky, starry-eyed about those huge numbers that they hear. And I always tell them, look, it's a business. You need to figure out where you're going to be profitable. And even if you get under contract to sell everything that you grow to someone, as long as it's within the parameters that you agree to at a slightly lower or even mildly significantly lower price point, it's sold. And if the market crashes in the meantime, that person's under contract to pay you at that price point. And that's what we saw happen with the CBD crisis, is what I call it. It's the crash. Was, prices went from 6,000 a kilo down to, 400 in a very short period of time. And a lot of people were planting thinking I'm going to get $6,000 a kilo when I'm at isolate. And then within months, that was no longer the case. And there was a glut of biomass in the country, and there still is. The 2019 and early 2020 crops, there's a lot of that material still around. And, it wasn't until D8 became such a hot item that CBD prices started to actually go back up because of that isomerization from the CBD isolate. So the minor cannabinoids are actually a benefit to the farmer, because even if CBD prices fluctuate a little bit, as long as more and more minor cannabinoids are going to become the new hot thing, and they're going to continue to allow from the federal standpoint and the state standpoint to convert CBD over to other cannabinoids, you're going to end up with CBD prices probably going up to around $1,000 a kilo, let's hope. Because that's where you have real profitability for, the farmer is that kind of a threshold. I question whether or not a business can sustainably last at even $600 a kilo on isolate. I wonder, I think those margins are far too narrow.
it really sounds like the key is knowing what you're going to do with your harvest, right, ahead of time, and having that business plan ahead of time. I know you have a ton of experience. You've worked with a lot of different people. You've tested for them, obviously. Can you talk about a couple of the different business models that you've seen that are successful?
Sure. First and foremost, the most successful way for a farmer is to have a portion of his crop be completely vertically integrated. You can take, go as simple as a rosin press, which is, a couple $1,000s, maybe even 10, as opposed to hundreds of thousands of dollars. Extract material on your property, depending on your state and local codes is regarding extraction, and then put it into edibles in a kitchen, set up like a restaurant style kitchen, build a product line, sell that product, be compliant, and have a much higher profit margin on that aspect of the business as opposed to the rest. And then the rest of it can get sent out as biomass and get extracted. So that's the most profitable model. Is going to be full vertical integration, whatever approach you choose to take there. If you have a little bit more money, you can be an extraction lab. Outside of that, you need to know and have a network of people that before you put it in the ground, that you are going to be able to sell to. And I always recommend to every farmer out there, stay away from brokers, because that's somebody in the mix that, the only thing that they have that's a benefit to you is their connections. And you are more than capable of making those connections. It's just, you just put the effort in.
What about the smokable flower market? That's something that's certainly taken off.
Sure. It depends on your regional laws. Like here in Texas, we technically have a smoking ban currently. So you are actually not allowed under the House Bill 1325 to grow CBD flower for the purpose of smoking. However, that's being fought in court, and we'll see how that goes. But the smokable flower market is, I believe, the last time I looked, it was like I think it's a $2 billion a year industry globally. And quality indoor smokable flower can reach as much as, the last time I saw, the highest price point within the last few months was roughly around $1,200 a pound, was like the top end. And that's reaching, the traditional industry prices. So that's a highly profitable business model. But the question then becomes, is that price point sustainable? Probably not. You should have your actual target of profitability be around 600 a pound, assuming that it just completely crashes at any point, because it's volatile. And you can definitely make money growing smokable flower for the purpose of it. But if you're going to jump into it as a traditional soybean farmer or a cotton farmer, you've got a huge learning curve in front of you. You need to bring some consultants in to help you out. And it's not
what I was going to say. It's just a completely different skill set, right? The cannabinoid enriched market is very, very similar to the current like marijuana production market for recreation or medical marijuana, where the other side of that is that industrial hemp side, and that seems like it's lower maintenance. You're not paying attention as much to the nutrients that you're adding. You're less concerned about flower production, if you even want flower production. Can you speak at all about an industrial hemp option being profitable?
Yeah. So again, make sure that you're in a state or locale that has enough sun and water that you don't have to increase inputs. If all you have to do is till the soil, plant the seed, water it when there's a little bit less rain, you can, deliver a profitable business model. However, I will say that, when you talk about industrial hemp versus, high CBD hemp, we're talking about dollars a pound as opposed to hundreds of dollars a pound. And it's a very, very different business model. You need large scale acreage, large scale harvesting equipment, seed separators, everything. So it's a very different business model. And you need a lot more planning up front, I would say, from a industrial hemp business model than you would from a hemp, smokable hemp or CBD biomass model. So if it really just depends on how you approach.
Yeah, I think we covered everything here today about what you can do with hemp cultivation. I think the biggest thing to me that Andrew's brought up and I've seen in the past, we've seen a lot of sad stories about people that got into this industry with high hopes and it didn't pan out, right? For whatever reason. The cannabinoid enriched production side is very similar to the marijuana production side. And like Andrew said, it would be in your best interest to get some kind of consultant to help you understand, what you're going to need to do in order to be successful with that. One of the things that we haven't touched on as much, but is the actual testing itself, right? Anytime you're testing new genetics, particularly if it's a strain you haven't grown before, or if it's a strain that was grown and you've seen the COA, but it wasn't grown in your climate, your environment, it's important to make sure that you're testing that regularly so that you don't get to the end of your crop's growth and end up having to destroy it. One of the nice things about the most recent regulation updates that I read was that it's no longer just, you have to destroy it, you have to burn it, you have to till it under. Now you're able to mix in other plant material from those plants with the sample of the flower sample in order to drop the THC level in your product. However, at that point, you've basically converted what option you had as usable flower into more of a biomass for extraction kind of model. So it's just something we need all of our customers to be aware of. You should be doing testing. You should be making sure that you are going to have a successful harvest. That's kind of step one. All the rest of the stuff is the sale process, right? And we're really hoping that people can make these connections ahead of time so that we don't have these sad stories continue.
Absolutely.
This is great, guys. I feel like there's a really lovely element in this of this discussion kind of empowering the farmer. And, just like Andy was saying, we hear a lot of sad stories, or you see threads online that are talking about this is a brutal industry and like people can be pretty burned by, trying to get into cultivating hemp. And I think Andrew and Andy, you guys have done a great job of adding in a lot of color around different ways that farmers can add their, get their information, empower themselves, and make this into a successful business for themselves. So awesome. All right, well, that brings us just about to our time, guys. Thank you so much for the conversation today. For everybody that is watching, I will follow up with an email for some of the references that we made to the genetic selection blog that we have, to the farmer's calendar. I'll add those into the comments of the YouTube video. And I just wish everybody a wonderful day. Thank you so much for joining us today. And thanks, Andy and Andrew.
Thanks.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.